When you think of Wyoming, what comes to mind? Probably wide open spaces, huge mountains, the whole American West vibe. But Wyoming's story, it's packed with some really surprising twists and incredible firsts. We're going to dig into what exactly makes Wyoming the equality state.
All right, so here's the big question, the real head-scratcher. Wyoming is the least populous state in the entire country, dead last. So how on earth did this remote, rugged territory end up being such a trailblazer? I mean, we're talking the nation's first national park and giving women the right to vote a whole half-century before the rest of the country caught up. It doesn't quite add up, right? Well, that's the paradox we're going to unravel.
Okay, to really get Wyoming, we have to rewind the clock. And I mean way, way back. Long before the first pioneers ever saw those mountains, this land was a bustling hub of human activity for thousands of years.
Yeah, check this out. 13,000 years. That's not a typo. That is how long people have been living in this region. I mean, archaeologists are finding artifacts from ancient cultures like the Clovis and Folsom people all over the place. So, the story of Wyoming doesn't start with cowboys. It goes so much deeper than that.
And this ancient history is just fascinating. Wyoming was anything but empty. It was a crossroads, a real continental hub. You've got things like the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, basically a massive ancient observatory built to track the stars. And get this, volcanic glass, obsidian from Yellowstone has been found in burial mounds all the way over in Ohio from 1,000 years ago. That's an incredible trade network. And of course, we can't forget this was the ancestral homeland for so many tribes, the Arapaho, Shoshone, Cheyenne, and many others. It was a place teeming with life, ceremony, and commerce.
All right, let's jump forward in time now to the 1800s. This is when everything changes. That ancient crossroads is about to be transformed by a totally new kind of traffic, turning it into what was basically the nation's first superhighway for immigrants.
And the sheer scale of this thing is just mind-boggling. We're talking up to 400,000 people. 400,000 settlers crossing the 400 miles of what would eventually become Wyoming. That's an insane number of people on the move, all funneling through the same corridor on the Oregon, California, and Mormon trails.
So how is that even possible? How did all those wagons get through the Rockies? Well, it all comes down to one place, South Pass. This wasn't some scary, narrow mountain path. It was more like a giant, gentle ramp, a broad saddle in the mountains. For hundreds of miles, it was the only place wagons could cross the Continental Divide. It was literally the key that unlocked the West.
Okay, so once you got through South Pass, you had a choice to make, and it was a really tough one. A life-or-death one, for sure. You could take the main route, which was slower but safer. It followed rivers, and you could resupply at Fort Bridger. Or you could take a gamble on the Sublette Cutoff. It would shave a whole week off your trip. The catch? You had to cross 45 miles of desert with zero water. Not a drop. So what would you do?
And this diary entry, wow, it just puts you right there. We set out on the journey at 3 a.m. and landed on Green River at 3 o'clock of the 19th, it being 24 hours drive. A 24-hour drive. Can you even imagine pushing your exhausted animals through the dark for a full day, with no wood, no water, just hoping you make it to the other side? That was the gamble thousands of people took. Well, as you can probably guess, having a superhighway of hundreds of thousands of settlers plowing through your ancestral lands, that's gonna cause problems. Big problems. It wasn't long before these rising tensions exploded into open conflict.
And you can see this tragic cycle play out right here. In 1851, a treaty is signed at Fort Laramie to set boundaries and, try to keep the peace. But then, just a few years later, gold miners blaze the Bozeman Trail, and it goes right through the heart of promised native hunting grounds. This broken promise leads directly to Red Cloud's War, a major conflict that the Tribal Alliance, led by the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, actually won. They fought so effectively that the U.S. government was forced to sign another treaty in 1868, completely closing the trail.
So, as the era of the wagon trains started to fade, something new and even more powerful arrived: the Iron Horse, the railroad. And it wasn't just passing through. It was here to stay, building a whole new economy based on rails, ranches, and, more conflict.
I mean, it's hard to overstate the impact of the Union Pacific. When it hit Cheyenne in 1867, it completely changed the game. The railroad literally built the foundation of modern Wyoming. It created major cities out of thin air: Laramie, Rock Springs, Evanston. It kicked off a coal mining boom to fuel its own locomotives, and maybe most importantly, it's what made the whole cattle ranching industry possible, because now you could get beef to markets back east.
But, of course, a new economy means new conflicts. Suddenly, the open range wasn't so open anymore. It became a battleground between the big, powerful players who got there first and the smaller homesteaders just trying to make a living. And all that tension finally boiled over in 1892 in what's known as the Johnson County War, a fight that pretty much defines the term Wild West.
So let's break down who was fighting who. On one side, you have the invaders. These were the big shot cattle barons, the established guys from the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. They basically hired a private army to, and I'm not kidding, go in and eliminate the smaller ranchers they accused of stealing their cattle. And on the other side, you had the settlers, the small-time ranchers and farmers in Johnson County who were just trying to defend their homes and their livelihoods. It was an all-out war for control of Wyoming's future.
Okay, now here is where Wyoming's story gets really interesting. Because at the exact same time all this violent conflict over land is happening, something else is going on. Something totally different. Wyoming is forging this incredibly progressive identity that would eventually earn it the name, the Equality State.
Get this date, December 10th, 1869. On that day, Wyoming, which wasn't even a state yet, just a territory with a tiny population, passed a law giving women the right to vote and hold office. No strings attached. This was 50 years, 50, before the 19th Amendment made it the law of the land. Now the big question is, why? Was it a truly progressive move? A PR stunt to get more people to move there? We still debate it. But whatever the reason, the outcome was nothing short of revolutionary.
And they didn't just stop there. Giving women the vote was just the first step. In 1870, just a year later, women were serving on juries in Laramie, another national first. That same year, Esther Hobart Morris becomes the first female justice of the peace in the whole country. And the firsts just keep coming, all the way to 1925, when Wyoming inaugurates Nellie Taylor Ross as the nation's very first female governor. It's just an incredible track record.
So you've got this pioneering spirit in politics, right? Well, it turns out that same spirit extended to something else, the land itself. The incredible stories coming back from Wyoming's wilderness inspired a whole new way of thinking, a really American idea, the idea of conservation.
Seriously, it's not an exaggeration to call Wyoming the birthplace of our public lands. Just look at this list of firsts. In 1872, Yellowstone becomes the world's very first national park. Then, in 1891, the nation's first national forest is established there. And then in 1906, Devil's Tower becomes the first national monument. Park, forest, monument, Wyoming was the pioneer for all three. That legacy is just immense.
So this all brings us back to where we started. The story of Wyoming is just full of these contradictions, isn't it? You have this tension between settlers and wilderness, between the big cattle barons and the small homesteaders, between brutal violence and radical equality. So what can we take away from all this? Maybe it's that progress is messy. It's not a nice, clean line. And maybe, just maybe, the most important, game-changing ideas can pop up in the places you'd least expect.
Hey, if you thought this was interesting, we've got a whole playlist of these U.S. state histories you should definitely check out. And of course, hit that subscribe button for notebook summaries so you don't miss the next one. Thanks so much for watching.